I want to cover one more thing before we wrap this
Yep.
up, and one more series of images that you took. And I'm going to start this off with a poem. The poem is called Repatriation, and I'm just going to do an excerpt from it. The coffin draped in Union Jack is slowly carried out the back, out of the dark and into the light, slowly down the ramp and to the right. The six approach the hearse, all black, and place the hero gently in the back. The six then turn and march away. Their duty has been done this day. Politicians usually have much to say. No sign of them near here this day. They hide away and out of danger. Much easier if the hero is a stranger. The hearse, with its precious load, moves slowly out onto the road. The floral tributes line the route, while comrades snap a smart salute. At the edge of a Wiltshire town, the cortege slows its pace right down. The streets are packed many deep. Some throw flowers, most just weep. The crowd have come to say farewell. The church bell rings a low death knell. Regimental standards are lowered down as the hero passed through the town. The cortege stops and silence reigns. The townsfolk feel the family's pain. The nation's flag lowered to half-mast. Our brave hero is home at last. And that was written by Sergeant Andrew McFarlane in 2009 about a place in England called Wootton, Bassett, which is where all British soldiers and service members that were killed in action were brought back home to England. And you shot some amazing photographs of that. And this was actually when I first got to know you. This was the first thing I found out was that you had shot these photos, and they're just incredible, and they represent, really to me, just an incredible view of England and what England is in the world. And how did you end up there once again with your camera in your hand?
I was assigned the first time I ever went to Wootton Bassett. It was on an assignment, and I turned up, and I was told the only information I was given was bring a really tall ladder because you'll need it. And I didn't understand the dynamics of what was happening on the street. So it was my first time, and I got there, and the traffic was awful, and I literally arrived maybe 20 minutes before the cortege came through. So I was running down the street with my ladder, and I thought, okay, here were the other photographers. This is what we do. We put a ladder up here, and the ladder became clear because you need to go to the top of the ladder. So when the hearses come down the street and stop, and the family members put their roses on the hearse, you need to be able to see over the top of the hearse to be able to see the grieving widows and relatives. And you're standing on top of a 6-step ladder. You're probably about 15 or 16 feet in the air, and you're really quite conspicuous with a long lens. And it wasn't something that I was really comfortable doing because the click of a camera in that silence was deafening. And it was one of those things that wouldn't. The repatriations had been happening before, for a while, I think, before I got there. And I mean years, maybe 2008, 2007, but before I, had actually turned up to to shoot my first one. So there had been a pattern that had developed over time. And the pattern was photographers turn up, they stand up a ladder, they shoot the pictures, the event finishes and everybody goes home and the pictures are wired. And my first time I was there, I ended up, the best image I shot was from the floor of a young girl holding red roses, looking down the street, waiting for the cortege to pass. And I was really aware of the ladders and the noise of the cameras, and I thought, I stopped myself from shooting because it was so loud. And I thought, I can't be the one. And you would see something happening. And you would see a moment when maybe a wife came out and she touched the back of the hearse with her hand, and put her head against the glass. And your instinct is to shoot that and shoot as many frames of that as possible. But I had my camera on single shot, so I was click, click. But all you could hear, it was like machine guns of cameras, and it was so invasive. And I thought, but this is how the photographers got their pictures. This is what they had to do. There was no way around it. And I decided, that's fine. I understand that. That's what we have to do to get the pictures. But I'm not going to do that anymore. I really don't want to get involved in this anymore. I found it too stressful. And what I ended up doing was not shooting when I should have shot, stopping myself because I didn't want my click to be the click that everybody heard. And even though everybody had accepted that this is what happens, I thought, well, I'm just not comfortable with this. So I decided then that this was an amazing event and that I needed to look at this properly. And bearing in mind that I had been late for it relatively, I hadn't seen what had happened before the hearses came. I had no idea what happened. So the next time I went down, I got down there really early and there was no one on the street, and I watched the build-up. And for those of that don't know that what the whole story about Wootton Bassett was, the bodies of service personnel killed in action in Afghanistan were being repatriated to an airbase, and the only route out of the airbase was through this tiny village market town
called Wootton Bassett.
As the bodies were taken to the coroner's office in Oxford. And it was the first time this happened. The hearses came through, and I think the town mayor spotted it, and he just stopped and doffed his cap as they went past. And then that just exponentially grew into, you'd have thousands on the street. Over the years, it just grew into thousands, and then the families changed their routine. The families would just go to the base and line them and pay their final respects, and then they would leave. But what happened was that the families would then pay their final respects, and then everybody would wait for the families to come to the street and stand on the street, and so that you could see how the whole thing was evolving into this sort of incredible 10 minutes. And it started with, people would turn up on the street and you'd find people that hadn't seen each other for years, and they would just, hey, how's it going? Do you fancy going to the pub for a pint? And they'd go and they'd have a drink, and there would be this, it was almost like a party atmosphere. People were really pleased to see each other, and there was this lively, bubbly noise going on, and people were laughing and joking. Then the families would turn up, and everything would sort of calm down just a little bit, and then the bells would toll in the church and there was complete silence. And then the cortege would come through, and it would stop, and it would be led by a lead sort of pallbearer, and it would stop, and it would give 5 minutes with the families, and then sometimes it was just one hearse, sometimes it was, I did one occasion there were six hearses that came in, and then it would leave, and then everybody would disperse, and then it would happen again, and then again, and it could be twice a week, it might be once a month. But I'd said, every time it happens, I'm gonna go down and shoot the story in a linear fashion, because I just wanted to show everything from start to finish. So when you look at the essay of 50 pictures, it starts at the beginning with the street empty, and then it works up to the last thing you see on the street are the roses, as the hearses have driven off and the roses have fallen off the hearses. But I couldn't do it as a press photographer would do it. I had to find a way of doing it, and because I just wanted to get those moments. I was looking for something completely different to what maybe the newspapers and the wire agencies were looking for. So I decided to shoot it on film, And I have two Leica M6s, and I had a 28mm and a 50mm, and I put film in because I could operate, and you just can't hear those cameras. It's just as opposed to the digital, which was really loud. And I started shooting it on film, and it was really hit and miss. I'd get stuff, and I'd go down there on some occasions, and I'd get nothing. But every time I went down, as I was building the story, I knew, okay, I'll look at the situation and work out what I'm going to get from this today and concentrate on one thing. And invariably you would concentrate on one thing, but what you would get was something that would happen somewhere else. And so it meant getting into positions that the press were not supposed to be getting into. So I would want to go onto the other side of the street, which was reserved for family. I mean, anyone could stand there, but the unwritten rule was this is for family. And I didn't want to intrude on the family and their grief, and I wasn't there to photograph their grief from my position up close. I just wanted to see the reaction of people around there that I couldn't see from the other side of the road. So I was taking pictures, and I felt so conspicuous, and I was there with these two tiny cameras, but I felt so conspicuous, but no one was looking at me, and I was able to just turn the camera around and just pre-focus and shoot. Don't put it to my eye, just turn around, click, shoot. So everything was sort of one frame. And yeah, I sort of gradually sort of built the story up, and I knew that it had an ending because the airbase that they were coming into originally, before it came to Wootton Bassett, had been rebuilt, and all the bodies were going to be repatriated back to that other airbase. So I knew at some point in August 2011 there would be the last repatriation. So the fight you have with yourself when you're looking at the story and you're sitting there thinking, okay, I think I need I need an image here to fill this gap, is that you're waiting for a soldier to die in order for you to finish your story. And it's not that you're waiting for a soldier to die, but a soldier dies, and you, or you know, in order for you to finish it, I'm not even articulate enough to explain what I mean by that, but the idea that you hear it on the news, 2 soldiers have been killed, and you think, okay, that's me going back down to Wootton Bassett to finish this story. So the idea that I had a purpose of going down to a place like that was really hard to deal with, because everyone else down there was there because they were involved in, or directly involved with the soldier, or they were people that just went to pay their respects. And so you could say, in a way, if I wanted to justify it to myself, you are paying your respects in a way, because I wanted this story to be shot from start to finish, because I think it deserved that. It wasn't just about grieving family members on the other side of a hearse, you know, weeping. There was so much more to that story than that. And so gradually the story began to sort of fill itself out, and then in the end, I was there for the final repatriation, and the town was then awarded royal status, which is the first time that happened in I don't know, I think over 100 years, because it was the way, I think, that they were, the town, the way that it conducted itself was recognised, you know, by the royal family, and they just sort of said, listen, what you've done, you've not just put Wootton Bassett on the map, but you've shown how much dignity the British show when, you know, those that are fighting for their country are coming back, and the way the whole thing, and Wootton Bassett, they didn't want the adulation, they didn't want to be known as this place, they just thought that we need to do this, and yep, it's from the heart, like we were saying earlier. There was no ulterior motive for that town to do what they did. It just happened. It was organic, and I wanted to show that story. And so, yeah, that was it. It took, I think it was 19 months of going down and photographing it in every, you know, from every conceivable angle. And I was really proud of the finished set of pictures. I thought that tells the story from how I saw it from start to finish. And yeah, it was. And when it finished, I didn't know how I felt, because I thought, you know, when you get so used to doing something, and you know, I don't want soldiers to die so that I can go down and finish a story. But you try and work out how do I mentally get my head around what's happening here, you know. But the thing that's come out of it is that on the final repatriation, I wanted the pictures to be exhibited down there. I wanted to show Wootton Bassett what I'd spent 18 months doing, but I didn't want to stick prints in a room, and I didn't want, you know, I just thought these pictures, I shot this on the street. These pictures need to be on the street. So I went down and I found a bank that said to me, you can have both double fronted windows of our bank, and you can put your images up during the final repatriation, because they thought we would love people to see this imagery. And the reaction it got, I was really quite nervous, because there were 50 images going up printed on A1 size in a bank's shop, you know, in the glass in the window. And I was really quite nervous as to how people would look at it. I thought, would people appreciate this? And they loved it. They loved the fact that this had been done. And when I went back down to collect the images, I would say half of them I just gave away to the pub, where you have the pictures of the soldiers saluting outside the pub that everybody went to. There was the old lady standing in the glass window. There was the kid wearing the Chelsea shirt. All these pictures just went, and I just said, listen, just put some money in the charity box and just take the prints, because if all of them had gone, I would have thought that's fantastic, because I didn't want to keep them. I just wanted, I thought if somebody wants that and they want it, that's amazing. And a lot of them went. And that to me was vindication of having spent that time and done it, you know. And during that time as a photographer, I grew, because I'd sort of come out of that way of shooting for the wire, which is all about a single image, tell a story in the single image, you know. And I suppose ever since the beginning, I've always been a photographer who wanted to tell a story, but with a series of images, not just. And there's a skill to doing what the wire guys do, and I had that skill, and I did it, but I wanted to just expand my palette as a photographer, and that meant spending time on stories and trying to tell it as, you know, as a complete. So you could take one picture out of there and go, well, what does that mean, that picture? But if you put it into the set, you go, oh, okay, now I know what it means. So you're not shooting standalone images, you're shooting images that mean something when they're put together as a package. And that was, I was very proud of those pictures.
Well, like I said, those pictures are amazing, and I think they did exactly why Wootton Bassett was, what was it named, a royal town?
Royal Wootton Bassett.
Royal Wootton Bassett. I think it reflected exactly what that put forth, and that is the pride of England, the honor of England, the respect of England. And I think that was all captured not only in the town, but in the images that you took. And I think we've been going for a long time right now. And I think that's about all we've got for tonight. I know I do want to say, obviously, thanks for coming on. I know I worked with some photographers overseas. Some of them just took incredible risks to get capture the moments that they captured. You know, if the book that Leif and I wrote, guy named Todd Pittman, who is their combat, he was a photographer and just took some incredible images, and we were honored to be able to take those images and put them in the book. But I know there's many photographers, journalists around the world that take great risks to report and capture the stories and get them spread around, and a lot of them are killed. And you mentioned one in the beginning, but there's a lot of reporters and photographers, journalists that are out there in the world that they take huge risks and sometimes they pay the ultimate price for their job. And I know this was, I know I said a couple things on the podcast that were pretty rough. I appreciate everyone for sticking through those tough moments. Appreciate you traveling to those places and sticking through those tough moments yourself, Kieran. And thanks for everybody for listening to the podcast.